You are listening to AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who are all about the lyrics. We're your hosts. I'm Jenn.
I'm Maansi.
And I'm Jodi.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Welcome back to another episode of AP Taylor Swift. Today, we're getting a little philosophical, I guess. Our topic today is time, mystical time, which may or may not have been the influence for doing this episode. But time is one of those things that's a literary device. It shows up in poetry. It's a great metaphor. So we decided, how does Taylor deal with time? But before we get to our songs, Jenn, as our professor, actual professor, I mean, you're the closest. We are unofficial professors of Taylor Swift, but you actually have taught.
At the collegiate level, yes, I have.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us, this is going to be deep, give us an overview of time.
I picked like 3 ways we can talk about time, just to put at the overview here, but I'm sure we'll get into other things because, again, it's a big, complex thing. But a couple of things. One is it can be like a structure. So we talk about flashbacks. You can talk about flash forwards, a fragmented time. And that's really common in like thriller or suspense where you're doing flashbacks and then there's like a reveal that a character is who you trusted was actually the bad guy all along. Like you think of like an amnesia type of story. The one that came to mind for me is Memento.
I love Memento.
The film, which if you haven't seen it, it's a guy who only has short-term memory, so he can only remember short periods of time, but he's trying to solve, I believe, his wife's murder. The story itself is told in the segments of time that he can like remember. It's like 5 to 10 minutes at a time, but it's told completely out of order. So it's very fragmented. He leaves notes for himself. He tattoos himself as he's trying to solve. So he's trying to solve a crime, but he doesn't exist in linear time with the way his brain works. So that's a storytelling device. It's using time as a way to create suspense to tell the story.
The Night Circus did that
as
well, I feel like, from a literature perspective.
Y'all, I tried to read that book and I couldn't read it. You guys
It's
always
hard.
reference it. I need
it's
to
hard.
try
I
again.
listened to it and it's because of the way it uses time as a narrative device, it can be really hard to follow. But once you figure out where they are in time, you can understand how and why they're using time that way.
There's so many novels that do fun things with it, with like the time jumps. We've talked about flashbacks and jumping forward in our narratology episode, but I think that's really interesting, thinking about time as a storytelling device.
Wuthering Heights.
The reason you move back and forth.
That's another one that uses like...
Yeah. Very few stories are told... from
straight.
Point A to B to C to D. It's kind of like...
Should we just keep listing more of them?
Yeah, like you will find more that have some sense of fractured time because that just tends to be better storytelling. But another thing that you can consider with time is this like theme or a contemplation of time, because time is one of the few universal experiences. And so the idea of time passing is something to contemplate. We have to face our mortality eventually. Change is inevitable. Decay is inevitable. The brevity of being in a moment. And one of the ones that came up in my research that I have never actually read, but you two love, is Mrs. Dalloway, because it takes place.
Read it?
I haven't. I've read other Virginia Woolf. I just have never gotten to it. But I do know, and you can talk about this more because you two love it, but it takes place in a single day, but she's contemplating all over with time. So it's like a meditation of time in some ways.
It's a great example because in that story in particular, not only is it within a single day, but there is also a motif of a clock specifically. That's a big character in the story. And as the hours move through the day, you kind of follow that. And Woolf uses that as a grounding measure to move you along throughout the story.
Yeah. And there are flashbacks and flash forwards as well, but the actual actions and events of the day, it's all in one day. And you see how time passes for each person, but also, to your point, Jenn, she's contemplating how time has passed from these more formative memories of her youth and where she is today, and contemplating growing older. And it's quite, I love it. I love that book. Maybe we'll do an episode on that, so you have to read it.
It's on my list, so I'd be happy to.
Perfect.
And then another one that I thought was interesting in my research was just the idea of time as symbolism. And we've talked about this so much. Whenever we do an episode about seasons, we've done summer songs, fall songs, and winter songs. We talk about how the time of year, that specific time is symbolic, it comes with meaning. But also, one of the other things it talked about was in my research, the idea of time as a before and after, of there can be like a defining moment, and then there can be this narratological strategy to be like, well, in the before times and in the after times. And one of the examples was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, which has like sort of a post-apocalyptic thing. Society collapses. And so there'll be the before times and there's the after times. And so it's using time to say, well, we were all different people and society was different. And now we're here. So there's this kind of divide and understanding the before and after. And we all have those pivotal moments. One of the other things I thought of, which isn't as impactful, but is an Inside Out, the idea of having a core memory that like fundamentally changes you, that sometimes when telling a story or writing poetry, you use those pivotal moments to create a before and after to help explore how the passage of time has changed you, or for the better, for the worse, or whatever it may be.
A new book that just came out that I just read that I think plays with these themes is called The Merge. It's a dystopian sci-fi novel that, like, it's about merging consciousness, but there's also a character that has Alzheimer's, and then so it like deals a lot with time, but also to your point around like using time as this distinctive like before and after. The way the novel is set is part 1 happens and then there's this part 2 after this. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it plays with time in that way and it made me think of it, and it's an example of a newer novel that if you like sci-fi dystopias, but it's also like real creepy.
That's good reviews. I just added it to my to read list on Storygraph because I have pivoted to Storygraph away from Goodreads. So
sponsor us.
You are
Free
my
plug.
only friend on Storygraph, Jen. If you can help me
maybe
find more friends, I will also find...
I have a notes app, so maybe I should be Storygraph.
I too pivoted from Goodreads because I was inspired by Jen, but I would like more friends.
Okay. That's our plug for Storygraph. Please sponsor us. Please get on Storygraph.
One thing about this idea of time as a landscape that's really interesting is that as a writer, like from the author's perspective, the kind of playground that it gives you to move in, I think is really cool, because a lot of times novels are very focused on one particular thing. But if you want the space to explore characters and do more, you need time as that mechanism to do that. It kind of opens the door for you to like really go in and explore. And I think that's a really interesting concept of like, I don't know where it fits into in these categories that you were sharing, Jen, because it's kind of like also a storytelling device, but also kind of the landscape thing. But just this idea that there's a lot more you can do when you open up the doors. And sometimes people, like we all know in the course of a lifetime, people change really dramatically. And so when you're looking at one moment in time, things seem a particular way. And then when you're given the chance to fast forward 80 years, I think of Atonement as a book where something happens in the kid's youth. And then there's all these things that unfold. And then the story is told. You find out from the narrator many, many, many years later, and then you realize what actually happened. It's a interesting device that way, and that will be relevant to my song, which is why I bring it up.
I was going to say, do we want to get into how Taylor plays with time?
Sure, yeah. So I can start off with the first song. I picked the song 15 from Fearless. It came out in 2008. It was written by Taylor Swift. I love this song for time for several reasons. It was the first song that I thought of. And I feel like it actually hits on all of the themes that you were talking about, Jen, in kind of different ways. For one thing, the title is called 15. And spoiler, we are going to be deep diving this one, so I won't go into too much details line by line. But the line that keeps repeating is when you're 15. And so in that sense, this entire song is about a moment in time, a very specific moment in time when you're a very particular age and all of the things that come with being that age. It's kind of a motif of like the act of being 15 by itself implies a lot of the things. But in the chorus, you kind of hear some of them, or she's like, or maybe not in the chorus, but like throughout the song, it says, when you're 15 and your first kiss makes your head spin round and somebody tells you they love you, you're going to believe them. Just a lot of lines of like, when you're 15, this is what life is like. And she also goes on to use time as a storytelling device in this song. It does start off as like a kind of once upon a time in some ways. You walk through the doors, it's a morning of your first day, it's freshman year. So the song itself follows a kind of narrative structure that starts on chronologically at one moment in time, and then you kind of follow the journey of the two characters in the song, and certain events unfold much like they would in a story, and you're going throughout the course of the year to understand that. So time is used that way chronologically. And then lastly, and perhaps my favorite use of time, is the more thematic landscape setting use of time. The line, which I think all of us as Swifties love, has become extremely relevant these days, is, well, in your life, you'll do things greater than dating the boy on the football team. I didn't know it at 15. All kinds of irony, but it's just like, it's one of those.
It's like the most dramatic irony you can get.
The most dramatic.
Argue though that it is still true that she has done greater things than that.
She has done good. But like this idea, the idea of I didn't know it at 15. Now you have jumped forward into the future and you're looking backwards and you're looking at the entire void of everything that has yet to pass and will come to pass. And if that line is good on its own, my all-time favorite is, it's before you know who you're supposed to be, I didn't know who I was supposed to be at 15, is such a powerful line that has only gotten more powerful with time, which is funny in itself with our theme being time. But it's just like, I heard this song, obviously we heard this song when it came out in 2008. I've heard Taylor Swift perform this song in 1989. I've heard her perform this on the Eras tour. And every time you hear her sing this song, kind of like Long Live, because she gets greater and greater and greater when she says, you don't know who, like, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. That starts to hold more and more and more weight every time as well, because you're just like, how could you know at 15 what this would become? And I love that like gap between what it is and what you will eventually be, that you can look back on, the more and more distant that you get from it. So that's that like last most abstract use of time that I think is really, really powerful, that just makes the whole song that much more impressive.
Yeah, the song really plays on nostalgia, which is funny because technically she wrote it when she was like probably 17. So she really wasn't that far from 15.
I mean, when you're 15, 2 years also feels like a lifetime.
I was just going to say that like when you're a teenager, the difference between 15 and 17 is huge.
It's a driver's license.
It's a driver's license. It's so many things.
Freshman year versus senior year, very different.
It's a very big shift then. But now, like with time, this song gets even more nostalgic, even more emotional, because you're thinking back to now, I really didn't know.
Yeah.
Like
we
at 15,
still don't know. It gets 15, more and more.
You think everything is important. We have our high school episode, which is when we talked about how big and emotional everything feels when you are in high school, when you're a teenager, because that's your whole world. Right. You don't know responsibility and rent.
Well, you've never stepped out of that community. I mean, until then,
most people have not had to.
Like elementary schools are tiny. Middle schools are bigger than that. High schools feel like a city when you first enter, and that's your world. Like that's the parameters of your world. And then you enter the real world and you're like out in the open.
So I think that's something that this song, that time does for me in this song, is give this sense of nostalgia. And that's such an interesting nostalgia itself is a really interesting idea to play with. And then nostalgia changes when you're looking, depending on how much time you're looking back on.
Yeah.
One of my honorary mention songs was going to be You're on Your Own, Kid, because I think that song plays a lot with like moments in time and growth. And it's not what I chose to do, but I do think this song in particular could map to the first stanza of You're on Your Own, Kid, of that youthful, dreaming, I think there's a loss of innocence in this song, which we'll get into in the deep dive, but with Abigail gave everything she had to a boy who changed his mind and we both cried, that it captures that moment in time of like youth in a really specific way that she has continued to map to her larger career. So here at 17, she was saying, you don't know who you're going to be. And then when she did, I think when she did You're on Your Own, Kid, she was again reflecting and like, this song, I think we know Debut came out, but this song to me feels like a lot of like the origin story in some ways.
Yeah.
Like this feels like chapter 1.
It's rare that we get the admission from somebody who's become so big and famous of what that moment in time was like before that happened. And so when we were talking about like the before and after, when you use time to contrast, like what was it like before Taylor Swift became Taylor Swift, like the Taylor Swift is like, what was that like? And this is a brief glimpse in that moment. And yet you still have the nod to the future. Like you have a like forward looking prescient kind of line in here that's like, you'll do greater things. But of course she didn't know it at that time. And that's what she's admitting.
But she speaks as if she did know it, which is what I love. And I also love the line, but I found time can heal most anything.
Yeah.
Which is so true. And it's like to say that at 17 is one thing. And then to look back on that and be like, yeah, that's absolutely right. Time can heal most anything. And the more time that passes, the more healing you get. So can you imagine how, like, what it must be like if I think about me and when I look back on my memories of being 15, right? I'm a totally different person. I never would have thought I would be today where I am at 15. If you're Taylor, like, oh my God.
Yeah, what's crazy is that when this song was written at that moment in time, it probably felt like she had made it. Which is what's wild.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Like,
yeah.
in that moment to be a teenage pop star, like part of the reason it sounds like she knew is because she probably felt like this is the greatest thing that I've done, which is why I think this song becomes so powerful over and over and over again every time you hear it, is because even at that time, while she was saying this, like she could have probably never imagined how much bigger you could get. Like she is referring to her reality in that moment as the greater thing. And it only gets greater and greater and greater, which is just incredible.
Yeah, she was probably writing this while she was on tour opening for Brad Paisley.
Yeah.
And like that's a reasonable guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that moment. That's a nice humble reminder to us listeners too, because even if you're not going to be the Taylor Swift, it is fun to look back at your life when you're 15. I mean, 15 is when I met my husband, and it's interesting to think, I mean, this is the opposite of what the message of the song is. This is like literally the opposite of the message of the song, which is
there
like,
is
you'll
no
do things
boy that I met at 15 that I would want to marry. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know. I understand that the point of the song is you'll do things greater than dating the guy. Like for me, I still think at that time, like when I met my husband, we did not think that, like fast forward 20 years, you have a child, you live this kind of life in San Francisco, like I think anybody can look at their lives that way and think about where they were at 15 and then like where they are now.
Forget 15.
Yeah.
I just had my 1-year anniversary of being laid off. And
yes, I
saw that post and I was like, it's been a year?
It's been a year. How crazy. And so
I was very shocked.
Right? And so here's a song that Taylor wrote about being 15 when she was probably 16, 17. Like, it's not that dramatic to say, oh my God, look how much things change. Because I look at my own life in the last year and I never would have thought a year later that I would be building my own business and doing my own thing and had the most relaxing year of my life when I was laid off from my job. And so I think that time really can heal most anything, just to bring it back to Taylor and the lyrics. And I think that's the really cool thing about this song in particular. And it doesn't matter whether we're looking back 15 years or we're looking back 1 year. There is so much that happens in that time period. I do this thing called Win of the Week, where every Sunday night I have a calendar alert to write down like what's one thing from this week that was like a win or like exciting. And I've been doing it now for 2 years. And the thing that's really fun is to go back and read them from the entire year, because you forget these smaller moments. Like when you look, it's easy to look back on a year and think of like the very big things that happened, you often forget the smaller things that happen, which is what you see in this song, these smaller, tiny things. I don't know. Actually, these are pretty big when someone tells you that you love them and you're on your first date. But anyway, the point of the matter is a lot can happen in a year. And if you just have to kind of give yourself the time to look on it and look back on it and reflect on all of that stuff. Anyway, I feel like this could be, we're going to say these same things in the deep dive.
Well, we can move on then and save it for the deep dive. I have the next song. So I chose the song that I felt like had to be chosen for this theme in a lot of ways. So I chose Timeless, which was a vault track from Speak Now Taylor's version, which came out in 2023, and also a solo Taylor Swift song. This song, and it's using the concept of time, and it's like not time travel, but almost like multiverse time travel concepts to
Which I love as a concept, by the way.
Well, then I have a book for you. Have you read The Ministry of Time?
Yes.
Maansi.
I've read it, but I think a lot of people have recommended this to me.
I recommend The Ministry of Time.
Add it to your to-read list in Storygraph.
They bring like time travelers back to like this current time period to study them and study the effects of time travel. Anyway, go ahead with your song, Jenn.
This is just a book recommendation episode. Time is like a big book thing, how they play with it. But the idea of the song is that it's not the when and where, but it's the who. It's that no matter what scenario or time we were in, we were destined for one another. That it's, I think, exploring the concept of soulmates without really using the word soulmate. This is a lyric-heavy song. Learned that when I went to pull it up, and I was like, I knew this was a lyric-heavy song, that I was reading a lot of it. So I'm just going to read a couple of the stanzas that go into the example she uses, because I think that's the best way to get into how she's playing with time here. So the first time she's talking about seeing a photograph that is, quote, black and white, saw 30s bride and two lovers laughing on the porch of their first house. The kind of love that you only find once in a lifetime, the kind you don't put down. So we have in the 30s, two lovers who just got married and bought their first house. And then fast forward into another scenario on a crowded street in 1944, and you were headed off to fight in the war. You still would have been mine. We would have been timeless. So we have the 30s, we have 44, then we go up to the 50s. There was one, like a picture. There was one of a teenage couple in the driveway holding hands on the way to a dance, and the date on the back said 1958. And then we kind of have a pivot. I think it's in the bridge. I didn't write it down, but it's also like a hard song to have a bridge because it's very narrative driven. But later on in the song, we have a big pivot of, in the 1500s, off in a foreign land, and I was forced to marry another man. You still would have been mine. We would have been timeless. There's more in the song, but that gives you the idea of these sort of multiverse time of it doesn't matter when or where or how, like, I would find you. And in some ways, I think this playing with time and saying that time is irrelevant legitimizes this relationship in a lot of ways of we would have found each other in every timeline, like you can't keep us apart, the romanticization of that, and does what Maansi always loves to talk about, how she elevates something normal and makes it something magical, like in Enchanted. But she's elevating this everyday thing of like a picture before a dance, these things that are everyday, but saying that like all of these examples of it remind me of the love we have because our love is so magnificent. It captures like every love that's ever existed. And mythological in some ways, it's like creating a mythology around this love and this relationship. I couldn't find a better word for it, but that's kind of what it felt like she was trying to do with this play with time.
I love this idea of removing time as like what happens in the absence of time. If you remove time as a factor, then you have something that's so pure that transcends time, no matter what the time is about, no matter the conflicts or the struggles of the time, you can still have something that can surpass that. This song, apparently she wrote about her grandparents' love story. It's written
so
about
sweet.
them, and I freaking love that because there's also something there even in like the influence of it being multi-generational already. Somebody reflecting on a past love and then still applying that to different times outside of that is really beautiful. And then this also, I've brought this up so many times, but also in my culture, because we have this concept of rebirth, like in the Hindu culture, when you get married, it's supposed to be for 7 lifetimes. So they look at relationships not as like a here on this earth right now. It's like you are tied together for multiple lifetimes.
I love that.
And it takes the pressure off a little bit of like the day-to-day arguments in some ways, I think. Well, it depends on your relationship. But I think for me, it takes the pressure off of the relationship in some ways, because it's like you feel like your love is something extraordinary and something bigger than just like your moment here. It's like, no, this is like a thing that transcends our generation, our lifetime. It's much bigger than yourself. And that's what you were saying, Jen, about giving it that mythical elevation is so spot on. It's like trivial things seem extra trivial when you put it in comparison with something that's so great.
Yeah, either you've been fighting over who's taking out the trash in the last 6 lifetimes, or you're like, oh, whatever, we'll finish this fight in the next lifetime. I don't feel like dealing with this now.
I'll let you win this time, but in the next 7 lifetimes.
In the next life, it's not happening. This song reminds me of Outlander.
Yeah, I had that thought too.
Yes.
I've seen it. I've never read it, but I know enough about it to know that it makes sense.
I've never read it, but I've watched the first like 5 seasons or something like that, and it just this feels like Outlander.
I love Outlander so much.
It's a good one. Yeah, this is a very, like, to your point, Jen, it's a very lyrically dense song, so much that it just kind of feels like a short story. It feels it's totally not even a poem.
Does.
This is a short story set to music.
Well, and it does the thing that we sort of talked about, I think, in Mrs. Dalloway, where the general concept of the story is that she's in a thrift shop looking at old photos or at old things, and so the core action is her just standing in the shop, but then she's seeing items and reflecting on like, oh, if that was like that could have been us, or that could have been us, or that could have been us. So it's this kind of one moment in time that she's jumping around, so it does that too. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is I also think it's interesting that there's an underlying sense of sort of anxiety or conflict in some of these examples, that the war one is like, oh, he's leaving to go off to war.
She picked 1944. Like, that's quite the time to pick.
Yeah, and in like the 1500s, I'm forced to marry another man. And I thought that was interesting of like, I think in some ways it's saying like, oh, even in facing any sort of massive struggles that the world is seeing, like a world war, or through like intense patriarchal
bubonic plague, like whatever it is. That wasn't it.
That's definitely
some
sort of plague for sure.
Yeah, not a chill time. But I also like felt like some of it was her also acknowledging the inevitable decay of time, because I think by going back in the past, there's also this acknowledgement that she's looking at pictures of dead people, which, not to be morbid, but sort of like to the multiple lifetimes thing that Maansi was saying of like our love can transcend time. And I didn't know it was potentially about her grandparents, but one of the final points I wanted to make is she does this a lot and we talk about it, but by writing this song, she has defeated the inevitable decay of time in some ways, because that love is now immortalized in this song. So it's like there is some of that anxiety, there is some of this inevitability to the end, because like we're saying, anytime you play with time, there's a little bit of that acknowledgement in there. But art is a way that we fight against the inevitability of death and of decay, because we can immortalize a moment, emotion, a person, whatever it may be. So the concept now that she's immortalized her grandparents' love in this song is really beautiful, and just puts a bow on this whole concept of time and love and transcending time through both love and art. And it was through her love of her grandparents that she made this art about their, like it's just like we're kind of in this really beautiful cycle of all of those things together.
The idea of looking at old photos is so interesting, because sometimes, have you ever had this moment where you like look, or maybe you haven't, but I was just at home in my ancestral home in India, and I was looking at a lot of our family photos, and sometimes you look into old faces and you see yourself, or like you see people you know around you. And I don't know which set of grandparents this is about for her, but I remember reading this article about Marjorie, Taylor's grandmother, and there's a photo of her and it looks exactly like Taylor Swift. Like they have the same laugh. Like there obviously some features will be different, but it was just the kind of photo that it was, maybe the angle, but it looks exactly like Taylor. And it's like, I can imagine like writing something like this, and also when you see yourself in older photos, it's easier to imagine other times, you know, and making this idea of like a lasting love through many generations and centuries or whatever, because these faces crop up again and again throughout history in different scenarios too. I think the first three stanzas, maybe like the 1930s to 50s, feels like it could just all be about her grandparents. Like that feels like it could be really specific and relevant maybe to their story. But the 1500s is really like out of left field, right?
Well, that's where
But
you
I
get
just,
to like the many lifetimes together.
like different versions. But I just wonder if there's like something there to looking at old photos and imagining the different scenarios play out.
I am adopted, so no, I have not had the experience of
I
looking at family photos.
As I was saying it, I was like, maybe you haven't, but I get it. But some of
conceptually, I understand.
Yeah. The idea
as I was saying it, I was like, Jenn hasn't, but Jodi, maybe.
Yeah. Genetics are very strong in my family, so we all look alike. And then you look back at I looked at photos of my grandfather when he was a kid, and I was like, that looks like my brother. It's wild.
Yeah.
Really there was some idiot on the internet had posted a picture of Taylor and her mom and been like, they have this, guess who uses the same surgeon? And someone just reposted it and was like, breaking news, man doesn't realize that mother and daughter may share key features.
Genes.
I was like, guys, what is happening?
It's really funny. Well, I've got the final song, which I'm just going to say it and then I'll give my analysis of all of our songs. I picked All Too Well, but just All Too Well, not the 10-minute version. I'm going to give an honorable mention to a lyric or two within the 10-minute version, but like...
we don't got time for that.
No, we just did Timeless. All Too Well came out on Red in 2012, track 5, because track 5. Taylor Swift and Liz Rose, so it was not a solo Taylor. I love that all three of us picked early Taylor Swift songs, which we'll have to unpack at the end of this in terms of like an episode on time, and we picked earlier songs. I think similar to both of yours, time is used in multiple ways in this song, but in particular, it's used for narrative structure. So All Too Well has a lot of flashbacks and tense changes, really to show the passage of time, both within the relationship itself that the song is about, but also the passage of time since the relationship. So time is really used to show like the nostalgia for the relationship, the weight of how even though the relationship is over, it still feels very real and present. And it's definitely non-linear time, which is what makes it feel like these emotions are still so raw. So the song starts out in past tense. I walked through the door with you. The air was cold. So it talks immediately about the relationship in the past. This is something we did. And then it also shows that time has passed since the relationship ended. I left my scarf there at your sister's house, and you've still got it in your drawer even now. So already from the very first verse, we know that things happened in the past and time has passed since we got together, but you're still holding on to something of me. So you are holding on to this relationship. And then we go into the present tense. So the first verse is past tense, and then all of a sudden we're in the present tense. We're singing in the car, getting lost upstate. So we are flashing back to the moment that something was happening because it still feels like the present. And I can picture it after all these days. So we are like immediately going back and forth in time. And I'd love to know what I thought about this song when I first listened to it and if I was confused. Because now this song is ingrained in us.
It's just Taylor lore.
But it can be confusing when you're actually trying to follow the time periods for the first time. We're in the past tense, now we're in the present tense. But wait a second, this isn't the present tense. I can picture it after all these days. And I know it's long gone. And that magic's not here no more. So we know that she's telling us it feels like we are still singing in the car getting lost upstate, but it's long gone. Even though I still feel like that right now. So we have this constant flashback and flash forward. The chorus brings us constantly this like time changing because there we are again on that little town street. You almost ran the red because you were looking over at me. Wind in my hair. I was there. I remember it all too well. It is like when you actually look at this song through the lens of time, I kind of, oh my God, I just had Jeremy Bearimy in my head. Like
from The Good Place.
From The Good Place. But like the exercise I should do, and maybe this will be the extent of the extra credit for the Substack is like trying to do a timeline of this relationship just from the song, because it bounces back so many times.
Adding it in Notion right now to be your extra credit Substack.
Great.
It's also interesting because like so many times when we narrate things that have happened in the past or even our own relationships, I think it's interesting, like the stream of consciousness with which like you kind of think about it. Like this song feels so devastating. Like I think she said that she wrote it in like all one go. She like went in and scribbled it down. But it's so interesting, like the way that things come at you, they don't always come in chronological order. Like they come in pieces.
Why I love, Jen, that you brought up Mrs. Dalloway, because a lot of people hate that book because they feel the stream of consciousness narrative is so confusing and difficult to follow. I love it because it's exactly how I think. I remember reading Mrs. Dalloway in, I think, 12th grade, and it was the first time I realized that you could write the way you think, and that stream of consciousness is a narrative technique. And I just felt like my whole world opened up. And ever since then, like I am the person that writes with parentheticals, and damn ChatGPT stole my M dash, but like
I'm not giving it up that easily. ChatGPT will move on. I will continue to use the M dash.
I put in more semicolons, so I'm not constantly using the M dash.
Don't let it win.
I'm sorry, but I think this song is very Mrs. Dalloway. The way it plays with time and stream of consciousness, and the thing that the two have in common is just both in the use of time, but also just the raw emotions and how those raw emotions are what drive the narrative. And that is why you get this constant tense change and this processing in real time of, of memories. But then you also have the fallibility of memory, and I forget about you long enough to forget why I needed to. This song is epic, and this is only the regular version. This isn't even the 10-minute version. The first time we only actually get the specific mention of time once in the original version, and I think it kind of serves as a thesis to the song, and at least the use of time in the song, which is time won't fly. It's like I'm paralyzed by it. And that's really the feeling that I get through these flashbacks and these tense changes and the use of time in the song, that she knows time has gone by, but it won't go by fast enough to make her feel better or feel healed, because it still feels like she is paralyzed in the moment that these good memories were happening and in the moment that the bad memories were happening. And she simultaneously remembers getting lost in the car upstate and singing and being really happy, but also knows that is gone and that's not here anymore. And that's a really hard juxtaposition to have, to feel, my God, I used to be so happy and so in love, and that's not my reality anymore. And you can't really reconcile those two things. That is heartbreaking and paralyzing. And that is what this song does.
Wait, I love this call out about using time as kind of like an accordion, because it's like, I think Jenn, you mentioned time can be used as a pacing mechanism, right? And so here, this idea that time moves more slowly is really interesting. And in some instances, it can move by fast, but we're specifically calling out the fact that it slowed down, which is interesting to this song in particular, because she went and was able to expand it into the 10-minute version, this 3-minute songs into 10 minutes, and you're still stuck in it. It's like art imitates life, imitates art moment.
And the 10-minute version has even more to unpack with time, and it goes into death and mortality and even more about seasons. And we've talked about, I think Jenn, you also mentioned how seasons can be used to talk about the passage of time. So like there is so much more, and I guess you'll have to subscribe to our Substack to see what I decide to do. It might just be like me, like this might be a drawing, and I might like scan in a drawing of like me literally just trying to be like, okay, when do these events happen and where are we in time? And then it's just going to be Jeremy Bearimy, the end.
It also reminds me of a book I literally just read a couple weeks ago, The Unmaking of June Farrow. I say it reminds me of it, but it's The Unmaking of June Farrow. The concept of it, I don't think this really spoils it. You figured out pretty early, is it's this line of women who exist kind of in like multiple times. Ooh. So you're in June's point of view, and there'll be times where she wakes up in her bed alone, but she can like vaguely feel like the touch of a man holding her. And like she feels like loved and warm and comforted. And so, but then sometimes she'll get like a smell or a sound that's like not around her. So she's like sort of simultaneously existing in 2 times. And then the book explores like what that is, what's happening, and kind of unlocking the background of everything. So it was a really interesting book. But I say that because in All Too Well, I think she's kind of doing that in some ways where she's like, there we are again, but like that it's long gone. Like she's kind of both here and there at the same time. She's sort of existing in both, and it's not as magical realism as The Unmaking of June Farrow, but it is this like mental ability to be in both spots and to feel so real that you can see it, you can smell it, you can hear it, but then you look around and that's actually gone. You're not really there.
To me, just feels like heartbreak. Like that is like the immediate aftermath of heartbreak is existing in those 2 realms where you feel the love and you can still feel and smell that person, and yet you're like, no, wait, that's not my current reality anymore.
Is it in math where you have like an x-axis, y-axis, a z-axis, but then there's like, maybe it's in physics, there's like a random axis and you're like, that thing is time is that axis.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is this axis that is randomly time? Like this parallel.
Love that you brought us back to AP physics. Thank you very much, Maansi.
We are moving far past our area of expertise.
But like, I just remember in class, I remember when we learned this concept of like, what do you mean you have like this like frame or this one, and then you just have like a dimension? We're talking about different dimensions.
What about the
three-dimensional?
Did you ever study the twin paradox where you have
probably
where you have there's twins and one of them stays on Earth and the other goes into space and like orbits around whatever, and like so whatever, like 40 years pass
or whatever,
and how they age, and that the twin that went to space is younger than the twin that was on Earth, even though the same amount of time passed. And you're just like,
I watched Interstellar. I understand how this works.
I took AP physics.
Yeah.
So there.
No, well, it's just, but like in physics, you talk about it as a literal next dimension.
Yeah, the fourth dimension is time.
And
or
so
whatever.
it's interesting when you talk about like being in 2 places at once. I think there's so much in the physics world that we're still unpacking when it relates to time in particular. But there is this idea that the way that you are today can be like your future state can be impacted, or you can impact something that happened in the past. Like you can reshape what happened in the past based on like a future state. And this is in quantum physics, they've like tried experiments with photons where they've been able to prove that the way that a photon jumps through a hole can change.
My brain's hurting.
Depending on, okay.
I have
all this to say, this idea that you can be in 2 places at once in your memory and somewhere.
A time turner, Hermione Granger.
Fascinating.
I have homework for whoever of our listeners are either like in AP physics or you are a physics student of some sort, or maybe getting a PhD.
Why
or have
in
a
the
PhD.
world is a physics student listening to the
because
three of
they
us?
love us. Because they're Taylor Swift fans. And I would like you to write a quantum physics paper or something on All Too Well and time and the use of time in All Too Well. So we will say, if you can do that and send it to us, or email us in our show notes, we will get you some like
we will
swag.
Tag Taylor Swift furiously. And
we will tag Taylor Swift furiously, but also like we'll send you some swag that only we have. Because like, how cool. Anyway.
Oh, cool. No one's going to do this, Jodi. No one's going to do this assignment.
Nobody wants an AP Taylor Swift mug. Anyway.
Well,
on that
I did
note,
have an honorable mention I wanted to throw out, which was I Hate It Here. Which was
Is that how you feel after our physics conversation?
I just like, Maansi was talking and I was like, for the sake of my brain, I need to tap out of this. Because I was trying
to
and
let
I was
myself
like,
glaze
no.
over.
I get it. I'll go write a creative story after
when
this
she says, here we are again, she is literally there again.
Quantum physics.
Because of quantum physics.
But the I Hate It Here, I do think has a little bit of like a time, and she is also playing with things of like go to secret gardens, blah, blah, blah. But specifically the line, wish we could live in, we would pick a decade we wish we could live in instead of this. I'd say the 1830s, but without all the racists and getting married off for the highest bid. So again, but in this case, it's like no matter what time period you're in, like there's bad in everything. This one's much more negative of like, I hate it here, but all the other times were bad too. So what are you going to do about it?
Womp.
Yeah.
My honorable mention was Invisible String, time, curious time, mystical time, wondrous time. But I found that the times when she just mentions the word time aren't as fun as the more abstract
We also talked about it quite a bit in our deep dive of Invisible String.
Right.
I remember us specifically
I think that's why
talking
we
about
put this topic on the calendar.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
Yeah.
So we did it. Yay. And now we'll add
Time
physics.
to go.
Oh.
Nice job, Maansi.
Thank you.
That was an early song we did. Go back to early episodes when we didn't know what we were doing. Not that we know now, but 2 years later, we know more now than we did then, just like when she wrote 15.
Time.
Curious time. Well, as Maansi said, it's time to go. Join us next week as we deep dive 15 right here on AP Taylor Swift. That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.